Welcome to Darklaw Dominion, where we dive deep into the shadows, the darkest parts of ourselves that we rarely speak of, yet we all feel. I'm your host, Dominion, and in this series, we're not afraid to face the raw truths of our mental health, the battles that rage within, and the weight we carry when no one else is watching. This is where we confront the fears, the pain, the trauma we hide, and uncover the power that lies within the darkness. Because only by facing it can we truly heal and rise. Let's take this journey together. Welcome to the depths of Darklaw Dominion.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Creative Dominion podcast with your host, Dominion, and welcome to episode 13 of the Darklaw Dominion Mental Health Series. Again, first of all, I want to say happy Mental Health Awareness Month in May. And so for this wonderful first episode releasing in May, I really want to bring together and bring forth a very special guest. I know you guys hear the name doctor and you're like, what kind of doctor? What, is it an appointment I got? No, not that kind of doctor. And so I have Mr. Dr. Kevin Mays here with me um, to really talk on a wonderful topic of leading professionals. And so we always see, the leaders of America, whether it's your managers, corporate executives, CEOs, FOs, etc. We always see all these individuals running around, putting out fires, leading from the front. But, one thing we sometimes might ask subconsciously, but not want to say to that person directly is, you know, how do you manage or you know, how do you live through trying to help everyone else, get through and get the most output for the company and what have you. And so very excited for this wonderful episode. And so with that, how are you doing, Dr. Kevin?
I'm fantastic. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you very much. Excited to talk about leadership because for me, before you can lead anybody else, you have to lead yourself. And that means understanding how your mind works. And it's all about mental health, emotional health, physical health, spiritual health. It's the whole package. How do you lead? You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself. And becoming a master of your own conscious awareness, becoming a master of your own attention, and deciding how you want to think. Because your thoughts, your beliefs, your thoughts drive your behavior, and your behavior get the results you have in life. So if you want to have certain results in life, it's important to understand that what's happening in your life comes from your behavior, and your behavior comes from your thinking. So absolutely excited to dive in, talk about how we think and how we can manage our thought processes and create healthy environments for ourselves, mental environments that allow us to live to thrive, to live in a thriving environment in a thriving world. With our thoughts, we create the world.
Awesome. And so again, welcome Dr. Kevin on this wonderful episode 13. Just, want to preface by saying, mental health affects all of us. And so if you're living and breathing right now, you are affected by mental health and your mental health matters. And so everything that's going to be discussed in today's episode, I want everyone to take one thing. There's going to be many things that apply, but I want you to take one thing that resonates with your current life, your current situation, like Dr. Kevin said, your current behavior and where you are in your life that resonates with you the most and really apply it immediately. You really want to take action out of this wonderful episode. And once you take action, I really encourage you to help others take action as well. And so with that being said, we'll go ahead and jump right in. And so, Dr. Kevin, really what made, inspired you the most to really kind of step on the front line of mental health, if you will, and become an advocate and really dive into the professionalism of helping leaders lead?
Now, it's a great question. For me, it's always been about adventure. I'm a self-awareness junkie, really, right? And trying to understand myself. That's where it started. And I grew up in a world where big boys don't cry. I'll give you something to cry about. Never let him see you sweat. All of these ideas were on me growing up. So I learned to be very unaware of myself emotionally. And when you're unaware of yourself emotionally, there's often a lot of emotion inside of you that doesn't get managed, doesn't get dealt with. It just gets held. And that emotion then spills over and starts to affect the life you're trying to live. And so I know at one point I was dissatisfied with my life. I was kind of bored. I was in college. I was bored. I was kind of failing college, but I was flying airplanes. And I remember putting myself in making some risky decisions that ended up getting me solo in an airplane upside down and then plummeting towards the trees below me and pulling the wheel to save my life. And as I do, the airplane is just skating above the trees, and there's such a G force. It's pulling the blood out of my head, right? And I'm starting to gray out a little bit. And I remember my life flashed before my eyes. And I thought to myself, my God, Kevin, this is not the career path for you. Cause I have wanted to study airplanes, study aviation and fly. I thought that was going to be my career path. I landed that plane. I never looked back. I kissed the ground, sold my car, bought a motorcycle, and took off across the country with nothing more than a backpack, saddlebags on that thing. I drove out from Michigan through Colorado and Wyoming up to Montana and Washington, down to Oregon, out to the California coast, just running away from my anxiety, right? Trying to figure out what is it to find contentment in this world. I felt like my life was going by. I remember telling myself, next year I'm going to be 20. I was 18 at the time. My life is going by. I haven't done anything. And I just had this churning quality of anxiety. And it's so interesting. I remember when uh, I was on the California coast. I ran completely out of money. My motorcycle broke down. I didn't know anybody for 2,000 miles. I had no cell phone, nothing. I was broke down, homeless at the end of the road. And I remember the anxiety I felt in that moment, thinking, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? And then it's like something opened. I remember sitting on the coast, my little pup tent, just sitting there and having this stark realization, like, now what? And I was out overlooking the ocean, right on the cliffs in the California coast outside of Carmel. And I'm overlooking the ocean. And way off in the distance, as I'm sitting there staring, listening to the waves, and the waves hitting the shore. And I was really still point happened in my mind. And I saw this little flash of lightning on the horizon because it was starting to rain a little bit. And it's like in that moment, something opened up in me. And I had this realization that it wasn't the end of the road, it was the beginning of the road. And that every decision I made at that point was up to me. And I had no excuses, nothing to fall back on, nobody to blame. I couldn't blame my house, my friends, my money, nothing, because I had nothing. And I had this realization, well, okay, whatever happens now is up to me, 100% up to me. And I've realized that's been such a rallying cry. That point in my life way back then changed me because I realized that it's with my thinking. If I control my thinking, I control my destiny. I control my world. I control my life. I control everything simply in controlling my thinking. However, we're all battling against these patterns we have inherited in our thinking. We inherited certain patterns, right? About what's important, who we are, what our ego, what our value is, what our worth is, and we all battle these ghosts too of not feeling good enough and not measuring up. And it's like trying to figure out, how do we measure up? Oh, if I work harder, people will see I'm valid. If I always say yes and never say no, nobody will be displeased and I'll be able to be a pleaser. But the reality is that's just like a hamster on a wheel. That's not us really being happy. It's not free will, that's for sure. It's just us being owned by a pattern we picked up early on in the first 3 years of our life. And so my quest ever since then has been to figure out how to interrupt that larger pattern, how to interrupt that a pattern, how to overcome the anxiety, the depression, the guilt, the shame, how to live life truly on our terms, and then how to leave a powerful, lasting impact, how to lead. And what I know to be true, before you can lead anybody else, you have to lead yourself. And that means getting mastery of how your mind works. So that's been absolutely my whole purpose on earth is to manage and master that. It's a pathway, not a destination, but I'm on the way.
Awesome, awesome. Again, I love everything you said there. And again, I hope you guys are listening and really preface what I said before we started by, taking that one thing. And I love that you said that you had that epiphany and that light bulb moment because I feel like every human, has that moment.
Mhm.
And for those of you that are seasoned listeners of the Creative Dominion, one of my favorite sayings, and I'll say it right now, is, everything ends and begins with you. And
Yes.
once you understand that, and I love how you said, you had no excuses. A lot of times we say, "Oh, my ex-girlfriend from high school, she,
Uh-huh.
cheated on me on prom night, and I walked into the room and found her with another guy, and that's why I never had a successful relationship." Or, "Oh, well, growing up, my mom, when we went to McDonald's, we could never get the Big Mac. We always had to eat off the dollar meal, so, that's why, I never, go out to eat and have fancy things." So many, those are just some few examples, but, so many limitations we put on ourselves, and so many, patterns, like Dr. Kevin was saying, that we attach to ourselves, and we're, slaves and owned by subconsciously, sometimes not even realizing that we're doing them. A big thing that's right now is just weight loss. We see, so many people, we constantly, we eat out, we drink, so many coffee, so many sodas a day. And then we go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "Hey, if you don't change this pattern, like Kevin was speaking about, it's gonna lead to, different diseases and, surgeries, deaths, etc., and, ailments." And, they say, "Hey, if you get on, this medication, or hey, if you lose weight, you'll have a healthier life." And um, I love using that example because that's the point, that could be considered a point similar to what Dr. Kevin was saying when he was sitting on the horizon, overlooking that beach. And you have the decision. The doctor just said the facts. And there's a lot of facts in life. Every pattern has a fact of life. If you go down, if you start doing drugs, you're gonna have the pattern of someone that does drugs. And so it's up to you, like Dr. Kevin was saying, to decide, hey, do I want to continue, do I want to be a drug addict, or do I want to have this pattern, or do I want to change? Again, that's all up to you. So I love everything that you said there, regarding, again, thanks for being, vulnerable and transparent with your personal, story and testimony.
Well, and Darian, you have just said so much as well, so much wisdom, so much good stuff in what you just said. What you left, though, the last thing you said really made me think of the power of having vision in your life, how important it is to have an idea of what's possible, to have a destination, to have clarity of what that thing is, that life you're trying to live. When we lose sight of that vision, then it becomes hard to we don't have a milepost or a North Star to make decisions against. It's hard to be aligned with ourselves. We start making decisions for the moment and not for the long term. And that's the hard thing. We humans, we're so hedonistic. We make decisions towards what feels good in the moment and what blocks the pain. We don't like something, so we don't want to feel it because we say it feels bad. But the reality is, a bad feeling is just a feeling. Remove the word bad. It's just a feeling. And we are here on earth to experience all of the feelings. Although, as humans, right, we move away from what doesn't feel good and towards what does, so we end up trying to block out these bad experiences. And so often I find people turn to drugs or alcohol or some other form of some vehicle to not pay attention to the stuff they don't like. So much of the work, in my mind, the real strength and the real goal is not about living this life where everything's sunshine and roses, but learning to be okay and to keep your seat and to stay grounded when things aren't. You know what? We all have trauma. We all have things that happen to us. And the work is to be able to learn to just keep your seat and to be okay with all of who you are. The beautiful thing too, you're talking about these patterns we inherit. We get them legitimately. We get these patterns, they worked for us at the time. Most of the patterns we get, pardon me, most of the patterns we get early on. You can just look at your birth order. I'm the youngest. I behave textbook like a youngest child. My oldest sister is a textbook oldest child, family hero, took on all the responsibility. Everything fell on her shoulders. Always had to be the one who did things right. I was the one who came along. There were no rules. Things didn't apply to me. I did what I wanted. Both of them they're patterns, and those patterns will be the secret to your success, and they will absolutely shoot you in the foot if you're not paying attention. The thing is, though, what I love, we come into the world and we don't have those patterns. We don't have the software. And our job as infants is to have experiences. And based on those experiences, we form the software. We form the beliefs, form the ideas, the self-concept. We form the software that then drives how we move forward. And now here I am, 4 or 5 decades later, playing out the same software and living my life, making decisions based on the software I programmed in myself when I was 3 years old. It's time for an upgrade. Most of us, it's time for an upgrade. And that's the hard thing. How do you get the upgrade? First step, be aware of the fact that, I'm making some decisions that might not be working well for me. Making decisions based on the 3-year-old, the 5-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 18-year-old self. Here I am. I'm 20. I'm 30. I'm 40 years old. It's time to rewrite the script. And the beautiful thing is, with neuroplasticity and the way we know about how our brains work, we can do it. We're not destined to be stuck in any pattern. We have the ability. We're different than all the animals for that reason. We have this higher level thinking that we can change ourselves and we can actually rewire our brain, which is the brilliant thing. Again, for me, part of it is you have to have clarity of what's possible. Establish a vision for yourself. When you see that vision, one of my favorite authors from way back in the day, Napoleon Hill, said, conceive it, believe it, you can achieve it. And it's powerful and it's true. If you can put an idea in your mind and you keep that idea alive and see it in all your senses in your mind's eye and work hard and nothing get in your way, you will achieve the vision you have for yourself. But it starts with having a vision.
Love that you said that because it actually goes with actually why I named the podcast "To Create Dominion" because it's always about having dominion of your mind, right? The Book of Genesis,
Yes, yes,
dominion
yes.
of the earth and the sea, but having dominion of your mind. And I heard a really cool thing on by a preacher named Tiffany about how you were saying about going to those different avenues of drugs, alcohol,
Mhm.
gambling, etc. She said her name's Tiffany. I can't remember the last name, but she always said that that's why they call it distractions because it disattracts you from that vision, from that goal, or
Mhm.
from where you're
Mhm.
trying to be in your life. And I was actually thinking about this the other day about just some of the goals I've reached recently, and it just couldn't be more true. How many times do you set
Mhm.
a goal, not just, it could be at work, it could be a fitness goal. It could be, maybe you're on here, I'm single, but maybe you're on here married. I do have children. Maybe you do or do not have children. Maybe it's like, hey, we're going to have date night once a month, me and my wife. Maybe even, similar to the age, different ages. Maybe this is your, fifth year of wedding anniversary and you made a vow like, hey, after this 5 years, it's been great, or, it's been what marriage is, but like, hey, we're gonna have a date night every month. And then if you notice, hey, the first month is like, hey, something came up at work, or life happens, right? Family member got sick, somebody
Mhm.
had a layoff or something happened. It's like, all right, well, now the next month, and then the next month comes, they're like, hey, let's just stay in this month. We're trying to save money, but again, 2 months ago, it was your fifth year anniversary, and you said, hey, we're going to have a date night every month. And, just like we were talking about patterns earlier, now you're in the pattern of not doing, you know, that date. And I had an old mentor always said when I had my marketing business, and I'll never forget. He always said, when you're setting goals in the business, he always said, I'd rather you set a small goal that you know that's possible in your mind than to set a goal based on what you want to help me accomplish or what you think I want you to accomplish. Because every time you fail, that self consciousness, what you're telling yourself is that you're a failure every time you don't hit that unlofty goal. And
Man,
so
that is so right on. So right. Well, if you have to own it. But when you do own it, it's amazing how the universe responds. And that's why the vision, I think, is so important. Having clarity around the not only what you want to accomplish and achieve, but who you want to become. And that's the thing. I love what you said too. The distraction is not only you lose the connection and the attraction to your potential. Man, in this moment, right here and now, there is infinite potential in me, in you, in everybody, but we constrict and we limit. We limit ourselves. We don't know how to connect to that. And we get distracted, we get bored. We don't know how to mine our own potential. And so we get distracted with all these other things that pull us away from really living the life that is possible. But we have to develop, in my mind, the starting point is being able to have awareness, develop presence, to know how to be here and now in the moment, regardless of what's going on. I remember experiencing anxiety when years ago. Now, I had spent a lot of time in meditation centers, learning how to just manage my conscious attention. And then I remember years later, I had anxiety, and I was driving my car, actually a friend's car. I was driving it, and I was driving down the road across Florida, and I had this wave of anxiety. Like, you might call it a panic attack, anxiety attack. I had never experienced anything like it. In that moment, I thought, I'm going crazy. I didn't know what. It was very disorienting, but I do remember this. I just came back to my breath. And I thought, but right here, right now, I don't know what's going on. Right here, right now, I'm okay. Breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. And I've seen so many people when that happens, they let their mind spiral. Their mind spins, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Right? We react to the stuff going on in our mind, and we can sometimes become our own worst enemy. Right? It's like, how do you manage those points, even when there is some biochemical thing happening, even when you are feeling depressed or anxious or whatever the story is? How do you learn to manage your conscious attention? And you can do it. That's the beautiful thing. No different than going to the gym and working out. You can work out your mental muscles as well to get stronger and stronger and mentally.
I love the way you said that because, just I know I was watching a basketball game last night and, just looking at sports, how many times that we on our, we call them the keyboard warriors, but, we're looking on TV or, we're looking on, if you go to the live arenas and we see this, these athletes and it's like, hey, why can't they, they were a number one draft pick or they were a top pick in the, why can't they be the next Michael Jordan or, why is this quarterback not throwing like Tom Brady? Why he was great in college. Why isn't he not panning out in the NFL?
He's the number one draft pick.
Right. Why isn't he that good? And again, it goes back to what you just said, is that mental muscle.
Mhm.
For those of you that follow, us on Facebook and stuff, I recently, this year I made it a stand to, read all 66 books of the Bible, just to understand. And once I finished, my favorite, one of my favorite books was, just Kings and Chronicles. And it's just, one thing that always stuck out to me, and not, not to get on like a Bible study tangent, but, one thing that stood out to me about with all the kings, they always said towards the end of their little story was always, committed evil at the sight of the Lord. And that's one thing that always stuck to me, whether it's Solomon, David, all the different, kings of the Bible. And so what I realized is that, hey, if this has happened to these big, prominent, figures, throughout history, and they're human just like me, it's going to happen to us. So, going to happen to me as well. So what I realize is that, you have to be mentally strong as much as you are for going to the gym or, at the, doing your holistic health and, drinking herbs. And, we've seen, how many people have you seen they can run a triathlon, they can run a marathon, they could, they look fit, they're ripped, they're cut, they got the, whether it's a woman or whatever, they have the best body or like the best, prettiest smile. And you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I was that person. And again, back to the mental health, they have anxiety or they're depressed or, how many people have we seen, take their own life or harm themselves? And we're
Mhm.
like, what do you mean they had six-figure job? They had a big house, 4 cars, Maseratis. They had the designer clothes, the purses. They had, million followers on TikTok and social media. Why would they want to, take their own life or harm themselves? And again, it's what we've been saying all episode is, that vision. If you don't have it for yourself, it doesn't matter how many people see it for you if you don't see it yourself. How many people have we seen, put on some clothes and you're like, hey, that looks great on you. And they're like, I'm fat or I don't think it looks good or I don't like the color. And you're like, that's the best dress. That's the best, tuxedo I've ever seen. Like you're rocking it. It's like, I don't feel comfortable in this. And you're like, you're crazy. And again, it's because they don't see the vision of that outfit in themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting when you talk about the kings that committed evil how'd you say it? In front of the Lord. It takes me back to one of the primary teachings I think of for me that resonates out of the Bible. And it's like it all begins with the word. For me, what that means, right? It's the same thing. If we create or do something negative in any way, we only do that with that state of mind. So if you do something, that's why altruism is the best, most self-serving thing you can do. When you're kind to others, you have a kind state of mind. When you're rude to others, you have rudeness in your mind. When you're mean to others, you have meanness in your mind. When you're defensive, you have defensiveness in your mind. But if you're kind to others, then your state of mind is kind. And that's the ultimate goal, right? If you want to be in a place of true contentment, you don't do it by treating others poorly. It all starts with your mind. So if your mind is really calm, peaceful, generous, you're going to live in an abundant life. If you want generosity, if you want abundance, rather, in your life, be generous. The state of mind creates the world that you live in. I had a friend who was always concerned, come to my house. I always had convertibles, right, in my life. I always like to have the top down. That's just the way I roll. And I remember I would leave CDs on my seat. And he was always, man, he would come over to my house. I lived out in the country in the middle of nowhere in Michigan. He came over to my house. Oh my goodness, your top's down. You have CDs on your seat. He'd put up the top, lock the doors. Like, what are you doing? I never had a problem. He was always the guy people stole from. It's just interesting how with our thoughts, we create the world. If you want to live in a trusting world, trust. If you want to live in an abundant world, be generous. If you want to live in a kind world, be kind. The struggles and the demons we face are not out there. They're 100% in here. Learning how to manage that, that's key. So I love when you reference the Bible, and I think all great wisdom traditions will tell you the same thing, right? Ultimately, it comes back to our own ability to be grounded and to be connected and to receive, because there's something larger. If we can be in alignment with that thing, and that's the vision, man. Ultimately, it's about service and being the best version of ourselves so we can provide our gift to humanity. And when you do that, it pays you tenfold.
Exactly, exactly. Now, while you were saying that, it reminded me of I know we were talking about music earlier, and it
Mhm.
reminded me of one of the songs by a band called Alter Bridge. It's more on like back to like the Bible, and it was just saying like on mental health, like talking about those emotions and those demons, storming the castle from the inside, and that was like the actual lyric that it said in the song. And so it's just like, guard, it's called This Is War as a song, but it's basically about, guarding your mind from those negativity and those,
Mhm.
harmful thoughts. And, what it really resonates with is, the power of, the vision, the power of the subconscious. And I love how you broke down those different mindsets because, again, your state of mind, determines your outlook on the whole day. How many times, you wake up, upset or angry, maybe your stomach hurts, maybe you had food poisoning the night before, maybe, your wife, upset you, or, you got some news at work, maybe you had a project due or a meeting that you didn't want to feel like going to, and it, just pissed you off, you know, and then now you leave work and, there's a wreck on the highway that delays you 30 minutes, and then you thought you put the pot roast in a sink to defrost, and you go home and you forgot to take it out when you left because you were mad this morning, and now you got to go, get some fast food or grab some takeout, and then you get there and it's, 20-minute wait to get your food because the line's backed up and they're out of the thing that you wanted to eat when you finally get to order, and then you just order whatever, and you get home and it's cold and they forgot your fries and they gave you a Diet Coke instead of, a Sprite. And I say all that to say that, your state of mind, can affect, how you live in that moment. And it can affect going back to the patterns, if the pattern continues, then now you're in a negative pattern of days. And so they always say, I think they said it takes 30 days to create a new habit. And so you really want to make sure that you're creating good habits. And another thing I'll say really quick that I heard, a very wise man say is that the quote was, there's no such thing as I had a bad day. I had a bad moment within the day and I utilized my mind to overcome it. And then now I'm on to the good moment in the next moment.
A day is just a day. An experience is just an experience. When we have an idea of what we want, it's like, for me, it comes back to our attachment. When we have an attachment to wanting things to be a certain way, wanting to feel a certain way, we create suffering for ourselves. What if you just let go and let it be what it is? I'm in line. It's a 20-minute wait. Okay. Maybe I'll meet some new people here. Every moment is filled with opportunity, but when we label it bad, then we resist against it, right? Then we don't like it. Then we kind of create a bad mood for ourselves. And in doing so, our brain releases cortisol, and now we're short with people. And guess what? When we're short with people, how do they respond back? When we're sharp, when we're rude, how do they respond back? What kind of world do we live in? When we're kind to people, how do they respond back? But so for me, it's like, I love what you're saying. I think I would love to hear your perspective on the notion of an attachment to an outcome. When we're attached to how we think things should be, how we want them to be, that creates our suffering, as far as I can tell. The world does not operate according to my expectations. The world is much bigger and is so filled with things that I don't have the ability to even perceive because I'm limited and trapped in this little thing I've created. What if I let go of that and let go of my expectations and just stepped into the presence of the moment? How would my life be different?
I actually love, and again, I love everything you said there because I actually was having this conversation with myself really all week. And I was like, one day I'm going to have somebody's going to say something. And I really want to share this with the audience. And again, I want everyone to key in because, again, that's the power of the mind. Because again, I've had this conversation with myself over the past 2 days, and I'll spare anyone like the personal like story with the person that kind of made me think of this, but has to do with relationships. And this person, a close friend of mine, had just recently, gone through a breakup. And, I was just on my way home from work the other day, and I was just thinking of, just thinking about life. And I'm just like, who determines what you deserve? And I really want to get on that when you
Mm,
were saying let go. And I was like, who just in relationships specifically, it was like, who told you that that man or that woman had to, fall to your beck and call? Or who deemed you worthy of that relationship? Or who said that person wasn't allowed to leave you, or vice versa? And those are some of the things that I was thinking of. It's just like you said, the fixed income. And it reminds me of commitment versus conviction. And I think that's what separates, if we just look at relationships and marriage, that's what separates, those that have been married a long time and are happy, and those that get divorced after the third month of an argument. It's that, again, like you said, committed to that outcome, or you convicted to the vision. Are you committed to the outcome? Or are you convicted to the vision? And the difference is, and we've seen, you can look at, athletes, your Kobe Bryant, your Michael Jordan, you can look at relationships, those successful marriages. We always hear the story every time you read a book, watch a movie of those successful relationships that you see. Is the story always goes like, hey, we went through this, this, and this, thick and thin, rich or poor, everything we say in the vows that we hear in the vows of a traditional wedding. And isn't it ironic that it's always, regardless of where they're at in the world or how it's laid out, that story is always like, hey, we went through this traumatic event. His mom died, my dad died, or, we were broke, we were homeless, we're out of money, we went bankrupt, we had to file bankruptcy. It's always like hey, we hit a roadblock, we partnered together, had a vision for our life, a vision for our marriage, a vision for our kids, and we got through it. How is it ironic that every successful relationship has a similar story? The books we read, the movies we listen to, those feel good success story. It's always like, hey, he came from a rough upbringing, parents died in a car crash when he was 6 months, and grew up in foster care. And then he grew up to become, he's facing adversity. And he had a conviction of, hey, that's not how I'm going to end up. And again, I love that you mentioned that, because it reminded me of, there's really no such thing as the word deserve. Nobody really deserves it. You manifest it with the way you think.
yeah.
If you want to be a millionaire, you go do what millionaires do and you become a millionaire. You don't, nobody to, and what really, I hate to, again, I'm not really political to get on like Donald Trump. But a lot of people, think that, hey, he's just a bad person. But again, back to what I said, who gave me the right to think I deserve to make that statement? Why would I, who said I could say that he doesn't deserve to be rich and be the president? Who gave me, who am I to say that? And then I love that. I just love that conversation, because the vice versa, if we look at, our own relationships, who said I was, a great guy, or a great, you know, boyfriend, or what have you, or a great, coworker, or a great, athlete. And the answer to that is, you are what you manifest. If you do great things, you're going to be labeled as great. If you do terrible, evil things, you're going to be labeled as evil. And it's been the same constants throughout history. People that do evil, if they steal, kill, sexually assault, murder people, they're going to be labeled evil, despicable, bad. People that, again, serve, they do charity work, they put a smile on people's faces, they help others, they encourage others, they're generous, like Dr. Kevin was saying, you're going to look at, that person, as wow, they helped me, they really inspired me to help, become a better person. They donated to charity. They're philanthropists. I really like that person. I'm glad he made an impact on my life. And so if you really break it down to that, if you bring it down to that granular level, you really realize that, there's no such thing as to serve. Again, it goes back to my favorite quote. It ends and begins with you.
Well, and I think you're so dead on. When I think about people who are doing things that others would call bad or evil, they are not happy people. And when you see people who are doing things that are serving and are helpful and kind and generous, you're going to find people who are content and happy. If you look at the two sets, and that's why mental health, it all comes back to that. It starts and ends with you, and it starts and ends with what you think. So one thing I think it's so important to pay attention to what you put into your head. What do you allow yourself to pay attention to? I love to listen to NPR, National Public Radio, until one day I was listening to it in my car, and every 15 minutes, maybe 20, they give the news update. And in that 6-minute news update, without exception, they gave what I've come to call the death count. In that every 15-minute news update, they talk about the war, how many people died here, how many people died from the fire, how many people died from the tsunami, how many people got poisoned, how many political officers were, how much scandal there was. That's what we're putting in as a society into our head. And we wonder why anxiety levels are high and why people are feeling this level of stress. Number one, guard vigilantly what you put in. What's the diet you're putting in? Not just the food, but your mental diet. Are you putting the right things in? The right things are going to help you have the right thoughts. And the right thoughts are going to help you behave the way you want and be the person you want and then live the life you want.
Yes, and I love that you said that because again, it goes back to what you've been saying all episode is just, how you think really matters. And it really shapes, it shapes your whole life, again, day by day. And I love what you said towards the beginning of the episode of, hey, the mindset you had, it's time for that upgrade, right? The software you had at, 15, if you're 45 right now, that mindset is not going to cut it. And how many people do we see, not just family, but, in the workplace, out in the marketplace, just going to Kroger to the grocery store, going to a restaurant? How many people, do we, look at it's like, dang, you're this old and you're still doing that? How many old high school classmates, it's like, you still working at McDonald's? You worked at McDonald's when we were 15, you're, 38. You're still going to the club. You're 57. We went to the club when we were in college. We snuck in. We weren't even supposed to be there. You're supposed to be 21, and we went in at 18 because we had fake IDs. And you're 57. You're still going to the same spot.
It's hard to let go, though, right? I mean, sometimes we love so much the experience and we want it to go forever, but man, our lifespan is designed to have a lot of different stages and a lot of different experiences. And it's hard because it does require some letting go. You get married, you have to let go of being single. You have kids, you have to let go of not having kids. It just have to be able to adapt and allow yourself to change and evolve. And I still go back to the expectations, right? It's like, man, when you become attached to my self concept. If I have a self concept that says, hey, in order to be okay in the world, I have to be important. I have to be the smartest. I have to be smart. I have to win. Then I'm the guy who's always showy and the smartest guy in the room and the guy who never lets anybody else win or, is ultra competitive. I call that a jerk, right? That's not the guy. It's like me being driven by these ancient patterns. And no, it's like the stuff that drove you when you're 5, 10, 15, 20 should not be the stuff driving you when you're 40, 45, 50. What got you here will not get you there. But something you said, I think, is profound. And that is all the experiences we had, whether we experienced neglect when we were a kid or abuse, or we all have our own story. We all have something. But all of that stuff, some people want to blame their past experiences for their life today. And that's a choice. Other people thank their past experiences because it made them the person they are. And that's a choice because the person you are is a product of all your past experiences. And now here you are. What are you going to do? It's 100% up to you. There are no excuses. The life is yours to manifest. How are you going to do
I love what you said. It reminds me of, fear everything and run or face everything and rise. And another good song, he said, what got you here will keep you there.
it?
And And I love that again, I love what you said that because so many people we go off, we try to do one thing and we try to skate through life with it. Like, well, 20 years ago I was an all-American in high
Oh,
school
yeah.
wrestling
Glory
or
days.
football
Glory days.
or
Yeah.
yeah, the glory days or I was the prettiest woman in class, I was prom queen 4 years in a row since freshman year. I'm like, ma'am, you're like 70. You got grandkids, right? Great grandkids. And it's like, you can't carry that same mindset when you're, um, and, we see it so many, with just mental health, especially since it's Mental Health Awareness Month and really in the youth, especially. And when I say youth, really that, it plagues all of us, but really that kind of corporate, that like 25 to 35 range where it's like, hey, again, what direction do I want to go? Do I want to establish a career? Do I want to go back to school? Do I want to have kids? Do I want to be married? Do I want to move out of state? I've been here my whole life in my hometown. Do I want to, try something different? Do I want to buy a motorcycle and drive across the country? Right. Everybody kind of has that epiphany, like you were saying in your, personal testimony. And what I really want to encourage, if you're in that age range or any, 21 to 45, 55, whatever in that professional corporate America age range, I really want to encourage you and say, find that vision, find your vision and be convicted in that. And a great example I like to use is again the gym. You know, we always say surround yourself with safe people. And the reason I say that is because, well, if all your friends are going to the gym, they all have six pack abs and great, curves or what have you, whatever you want to accomplish, you can't be committed to their results. You have to be convicted to your vision. And the reason I say that is because, if you're all going to the gym together and one day they stop going and they're like, hey, maybe they get sick or hey, we're already fit. We don't feel like it. If you don't go to the gym because they don't go to the gym, you're not convicted to that vision. You're just committed to the illusion of your friends seeing you trying to achieve their result. And so you really have to be careful with, again, that's why Kevin, Kevin said, guard your mind. What is the news saying? What are your people, there's safe people or unsafe people around you saying? What are the books you're reading, the TV shows you're watching? I don't watch a lot of, scary movies anymore just because, I know, the hidden messages behind, horror movies, so I really don't do a lot of
Can I say
scare.
something about that really quick? I
Yes,
love
go
it.
ahead.
I grew up in the country, and I remember when I was a kid, I had a little convertible, my first car. I saved my money and bought it. And then I watched one time with some friends, Children of the Corn, this horror movie back in the 80s. And I remember I was driving through the cornfields at night, home from a friend's house, at a four-way stop in the middle of the cornfields, and I was freaking out. Didn't even stop the car, just blew through the stop sign. And it was at that moment I realized I'm done. So I love what you said. I don't watch scary movies. I never, ever since then, that's it. Because why do I, some people love it, they thrive on it. I don't want to put the stuff in my head. I want to feel comfortable being anywhere, anytime. And I know that if I'm creating a narrative in my head that leaves me afraid, I'm going to cut that out because I want to be bold. I want to own the moment and not have doubt.
I'm glad you used that movie because, again, mine was, I actually, growing up, I saw all the scary movies. I've seen, like I said, I've seen some weird, weird stuff. But again, like I said, it's because people don't understand, like what we've been saying all episode is your mind is very powerful. We're created in God's image for a reason. And so everything you manifest in your mind, it shapes every single, if you look just, again, that self-awareness, like you spoke of at the very beginning, just look around you and see if you're self-aware, be aware of other people. How many people that they'll say, oh, I saw something, and we'll look, hey, we'll give them some medication and say you see voices or you hear voices or you're crazy or, How many people, and it's also with personalities, how many people have that, we all have that one coworker that just thinks they're the smartest guy in the room. They're always right. They're, the best thing since sliced bread, the best looking, the best, most money, the best style. How many times you go to the restaurant, you see somebody with outfit on, and they're just like, this is the best thing I ever wore. I look like a model. And you're like, yeah, you look like a melted ice cream cone. Like, what are you doing? And it's just like, I got it going on. And, we kind of see these things and we kind of laugh, subconsciously, or we'll laugh to ourselves. In their mind, their vision for themselves is like, hey, I look like a supermodel. And you can't change that. And then that's some of the things you have to realize, as you navigate life is, especially, I know I went through that age range earlier, but especially in relationships. A lot of times we say, how many people do we see or family we see in relationships? Like, I just can't get, he just won't listen to me, or she just doesn't understand. It's like, because they don't want to understand. And again, back to what I was saying earlier is, what makes you think you deserve the right for them to understand? And
Well, and I think I love it because the world we live in is a projection of our own mind. So we say they don't understand. Guess what? We're probably not understanding them. We're not trying to understand. We're trying to be understood. We're explaining things. If they would only understand us, but we don't realize that's a projection of our own mind. Let go of that and just try to understand and watch what happens. You'll be amazed when you realize everything that is concerning you, everything that frustrates you that you perceive isn't about the thing you're perceiving. It's all your mind. Your mind is the thing that's irritated. Your mind is frustrated. Your mind is hurt. Your mind has fear. It's not the external world 100%. It's the internal world. And when you understand that, then you can't help but take 100% ownership, accountability, and responsibility for yourself. It's time to stop being a victim. It's time to own your life. You get one shot at it. And whenever you start to make an excuse or blame or rationalize or justify why you didn't, you're making yourself a victim. You don't have to do that.
awesome, awesome. And again, like I said, it's been, we've had so much knowledge, spoken in this episode, and, so many real world examples. And so with that being said, what would you say, as, in your experience, would be your greatest success story with someone you've worked with?
It's fantastic. I can reach back or recent. Let me give two very different ones really quick. It's interesting. When I was years ago, I worked with adolescents who were, I ran some drug and alcohol recovery centers for a while. And to watch people find themselves, to let go of the substance and to actually learn to be whole. And to see people then go from that place to heal their relationships, it's phenomenal. But then I find now I work with executives and leaders, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like being able to become whole. I work with one gentleman now. It's just phenomenal. He's an entrepreneur. His mind is all over the place. Some might say ADHD. That's probably what the diagnosis is. And to watch him be able to learn to focus on one thing and steward that and grow that in a way that is serving his community and serving himself as well, and to help to see him create a better relationship. So many business owners I see, their pattern is produce, 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 produce. They're not producing a lifestyle for themselves. They're exhausted because they're a slave to their business. And to watch people be able to change that, change their relationship with their mind and their relationship with the world, to be able to create this thing that helps their society and helps them have the life they want and to have effective relationships. And that's ultimately it, right? It's not, the game is not he who dies with the most toys wins. It's how do we leave a positive impact and truly become happy and content in ourselves and spread the love, spread the joy. When I see people doing that, oh my God, it fills me up. That's what fills my cup. And that's my work over time, right? Is to help people learn to do that. So I've got so many examples, and I can tell you my own examples of when I've done it right, because this isn't all theoretical stuff, right? It's the real hard fought wisdom of life. And my goal is to help others maybe avoid some of the pitfalls and mistakes I've made and to learn how to be the best version of themselves. My God, the world needs it. The world needs us all to be the best version of ourselves right now more than ever.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Again, been a wonderful, wonderful episode, just on, being the best version of yourself and, really understanding, I hope, as you guys were listening and viewing, I hope you understand the power within, right? It all ends and begins with you. And the really cool thing about the human mind is you can make a decision instantly in that light bulb moment, and you could maintain the conviction throughout. And again, it only takes 30 days to build that new habit, and then you just keep going. And, I just really want to encourage everyone to really understand that for themselves. Understand your vision matters, your life matters. And I really want everyone to understand also, you're not entitled to anything. You don't, there's no such thing as I deserve this. There's the cool thing about that word deserve is there's no golden, it's not in the Bible. The Bible never said, everyone born deserves, whatever they want, right? It always said faith and work, right? Man, you have to, work. You have to, what seeds are you sowing, to obtain what you want, right? And so I really want to encourage people to really, like Dr. Kevin said, drop that expectation, drop the emotion behind that goal, and just focus on the vision and just focus on doing, what steps will make you become the best version of yourself. And so with that being said, any last minute, motivation tips, helping those professionals and helping people, become the best version of their inner self.
Yeah, well, one thing I'd like to throw out there, I send out a daily I have a daily kind of motivational email that I send out. Like to invite people, if you'd like to sign up, go to my website, maysleadership.com. You can sign up there, and every day I'm writing something. And it's been talk about that discipline, that practice. I've been doing that every day. I think today was day 72, and it's a story that translates into some life lesson, some leadership lesson, some business lesson. And I'm committed to doing that, the vision of writing every day. So I love that, just trying to put the message out there to help folks. So, I go back to what you said. It starts and ends with you. Lead yourself first. You do that, life is a beautiful thing.
Awesome, awesome. And so again, it's been episode 13. Again, happy, happy, happy mental health awareness month. And so with that being said, Dr. Kevin, can you tell the audience where they could find you? And again, hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful rest of their day.
Absolutely. Thanks. This has been a fantastic conversation. I got to thank you. Thank you for this podcast and for this conversation. It's awesome. Yeah. Again, go to Mays, Mays Leadership, maysleadership.com. You'll see my website. Again, sign up and get a daily email, a dose of perspective that I send out. Also, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. So look me up there, Kevin Mays, Mays Leadership. I look forward to touching base and meeting you all on the journey to becoming the best leader of yourself possible. Cheers.
Awesome, awesome. So again, everything ends and begins with you. Any feedback, reviews, feedback, I really, one thing I want, to challenge the audience with, at the very beginning, I said, take one thing that resonates with you from this episode. I'm really interested to see, what is one thing you learned about yourself in your current situation as you listen today. I'd love for you to, comment on our, follow, Kevin Mays Coaching, follow the Creative Dominion podcast on Facebook, Instagram. And, I'll really be interested to, hear you all's perspective on, what you learned about yourself in today's episode and, what you're willing to be convicted about and apply, moving forward. And again, reach one, teach one, and encourage others to do the same. Again, it's been Dr. Kevin Mays and your host, Dominion, for episode 13. And until next time, inside Darklaw Dominion, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining me on this journey into the depths of Darklaw Dominion. Remember, it's in the darkest parts of ourselves that we often find the greatest strength. Facing that darkness is not a sign of weakness, it's the path to healing, growth, and reclaiming control of your life. If this series resonates with you, or if you're looking for more empowering stories on healing and reclaiming your power, make sure to follow Decree of Dominion on Facebook, Spotify, and YouTube. There, we continue the conversation on mental health, domestic violence, and relationships, offering hope and support. Until next time, keep exploring the shadows, keep seeking your truth, and keep fighting for your light.